if we truly start involving. Because I have to be real honest. With big districts or whatever, I would just tell, even students, I'm coming to the IEP meeting. Or I would go in if it was a high school student. You need to be here. Well, my mother, I have to ask them if I can come. Okay, do that. Because if there was a big fight going on, I just would tell them, I'm using you, kid. Because the adults can't play nice together, and when you're there, they're much better. Let's just be honest. I'm just being totally frank. After all these years, of looking at that. So how do we involve them? We start them, like I say, when they're young. I have found usually about 3rd grade, really having, even if they come to the meeting for 10 minutes, at least people see, this is who we're talking about. Of really looking at that. Because I've had even high school students, and we have to really prepare them, coming to make decisions. Because again, I will tell you, when they're there, discussions are much different. Now, we had to change. It took a while because I had a couple, when we're sitting there meeting and we talk about that current level and we're talking about what they can't do. It's like we're talking in front of them. We had to change all of our course of action. Because it's like, why are we talking in front of this individual? They're here. Let them speak for themselves. Of looking at that. It changes the whole reflection, the whole thing about running and doing IEPs. So like I said, they can make introductions, they can pass out refreshments, they can hack out, but again, then we give them more time that they come. And I've had some students say, I'll come when you get to the IEP goal writing. I don't want to sit through that crap of, current level and needs and all of that, because it'll be the same thing. Kids are very, very honest, of looking at that. And so, but they need to get used to IEP meetings. And whether it be an IEP or whether it even be a behavior plan, it's their behavior plan. Do they even know what's in the behavior plan? That we're asking them to do. So before an IEP meeting, we sign a coach. We teach them about decision making, rights and responsibilities. We help them practice. We used to role play. So, because we don't want them to come to the IEP and fail. Of looking at that. Teach the student the reason for meeting, all the way down, and then which peers they're going to invite to the meeting. Do they get a choice? It's their meeting, of looking at that. I can't tell you how meetings change when you really start looking at that, because to me, we're taking almost a person-centered approach from the very beginning, of looking at that. They need to practice. If they can't speak, then do you put stuff on their communication board so it'll speak for them before the meeting and plan at the different segments? Do they know how to follow an agenda? And the biggest thing we had, what if you're being ignored? Now, you don't have a meltdown. We got to figure out how we're going to do this, when we're looking at this, as we go through that process. Because I will tell you, they need to practice. Just coming to a meeting to come to a meeting doesn't cut it. We have to prepare, everyone. I as a parent, I don't know if we get prepared enough. Especially if it's brand new to us and you walk in that meeting, it's like, oh my God, they're talking a foreign language. I don't have a clue what's going on. Looking at that, of doing that. That's why we always had IEP partners. A parent go the first time, not to be their advocate. But we had a lady that we literally contracted with in Deer Valley that trained parents to go with a parent to their IEP meeting. Because it's scary, just as a support. And again, not to talk for them, because we got to teach parents. You got to talk for yourselves to know what you want. And then again, why teach making choices? Because we're in the habit, and hopefully I have learned, we can't make all the decisions. Like I said, just the example that I gave with Brian. Boy, did he kind of put me in my place, of looking at that. And I will tell you, we got it because not everybody values input from students. Just being honest, people with this are often ignored when they speak up. So hopefully this will help through the years that our kids will be more successful for speaking up if we get them to start young. Then all of a sudden 16, oh, crap, kind of thing of going in. Now you're gonna include me in planning when you've all been meeting all these years, of looking at that, and now I get to start making some choices? No, we should start really young, so how do you choose? Like food choices at home. You want this or this? And with young kids you start, that Piaget, how kids learn, start with 2 choices and then add more, of looking at that. And then we're going to teach them what if they're ignored? How do they insist without having a meltdown? What about decisions when we don't know enough, of looking at that? So never give anyone a choice unless you intend to honor it. That's the biggest thing that I could tell you. I see it at home. I see it at school. I see it everywhere. Why? You said I could have a choice, and now you're telling me I don't? Then why did you say that in the begin with? I think that Genevieve and I had to learn when we got married about choices. Because you're living with someone else, we don't think alike. It took us a while. How did we work through this? So during the meeting, I'm not going to go through all of these. This is what we start teaching about listening to other team members, truly listening. What are they deciding? What's the support person? What kind of jobs? This really starts person-centered planning. Even though it's not called that because it's not formalized, like person-centered planning. And doing that. And then getting people to listen. If we have to find different ways to explain, but we got to be patient. I will tell you, I had a hard time having people keep their mouths shut, particularly with students with cerebral palsy, that it may take a couple minutes to even get a sentence out. No, you don't interrupt and you finish their sentence. That's rude. It's interesting to see the whole behavioral change, when we start looking at that and going through. Or not leaving, or just I don't know what you're saying. Okay, then we're going to back up. How can we do this? Of doing that. And then after the meeting, what did they do right? Role play, if we have to role play a different way. This is what I would be asking these kinds of questions when you go to your IEP, particularly when they get older, particularly in high school. Now, high school will freak when you start asking these things. Because the teachers they'll freak. I'm just telling you. They will think, what did you do? I've been visiting the high school here, and we'll be visiting again in a few days, and just to see what they're doing. And I already know that there's 2 or 3 that don't particularly care for me. They just don't. And looking at that. And as we thought. So the biggest thing is focus on the future. That's when we really get into future or person-centered planning. What makes life worth living? Because again, and it's broader than just transition planning. Because usually with transition, all they talk about is work and sometimes where they're going to live. But usually it's just about employment. To me, that doesn't cut it. We need to be talking about the totality. So to me, when we go back, I want to know where they're going to live. I want to know where they're going to learn, because learning doesn't stop. Are they going to audit classes? Are they going to work? And play. We all we don't just work. Because I see so many individuals, we've gotten so much better, but I still see so many individuals going to work and then they go home and they sit. I don't see a real life. And I want people to have a quality of life. So to me, I'm giving you the areas that be asking questions when you get to your transition planning. I would be thinking of this and working backwards. What do we need to teach 3rd grade, 4th grade to get to some of these? What are the skills? Because our one son with multiple disabilities, did he all learn all the curriculum? No. But when we looked at the curriculum, like I gave examples on Saturday, what are the big picture ideas? And I call it backward chaining. So we think, that's why even what will they do, you think, when they get out of school? And then, what do they need to do in these courses to make that successful? Of looking at that. Because to me, with our son, I wanted him to at least be able to communicate, because he had such few words. I wanted to make sure we worked on behavior, because he had lots of behavior issues, in looking at that. I wanted to make sure that he was absolutely dressed to the T, because he already had a label, and the people, because when you walk into a job, first thing they do is look at you. You just couldn't look like a bum, of those kind of things. I mean, what is real practical, of looking at that? And the big thing is social skills, of doing that. Because I will tell you, we're doing a really good job of teaching academics, and that's what school's about. But I see so many individuals leaving school and they can't keep a job because they didn't get all the other skills. They've either hit somebody on the assembly line, or they smack somebody, or they, F you, or that. I mean, they can't keep a job. We've got to teach totality, of all of those. So to me, all of these things about living, and how do you embed them, into the curriculum as we go through. And then learn. Are they going to go to technical college? Can they audit? Our oldest son with moderate and severe profound disabilities went to Columbus Community College. There in town, he audited. And what he audited, he took a sign language class because he knew some sign, because he didn't have language. He had a support person. Because I will tell you, when you start getting into this, say they turn 18, if there's one thing I would tell you, is I would be, looking at that. The thing that we did is we made sure that he got, depending on level of ability, he got supplemental security income. So when they turn 18, they're on their own. And we made sure, because he got a certain payment each month, because he had to pay us rent. People said, you make your own kid pay rent? That's because if he wasn't home, he'd be out in the community. He has to pay rent. So yes, he paid rent. He had to pay for certain things, but it left enough money that we became very creative, and we advertised for a support person. And so we paid him. And they became very, very good friends. Name happened to be Mark. Went to college with him, sat in with him. I mean, did, of looking at that. But again, what can they do? What can they still learn? Yes, Patty.
Can you explain the difference between audit and credit for everybody?
Well, audit, when you just set in and you don't pay, you just set in. You ask the professor, can I just set in and learn? I'm not paying tuition, I'm not doing anything. Credit is when you have to pay tuition to go do it. So, Chris just audited. It's kind of like now when you get old, in my age, they have these classes called OLLI that you can sit and still learn. Or sometimes you can go audit a class, of doing that. Because when you're after 65, you get all kinds of good things, of looking at that. I'm serious. I couldn't wait to be 65. I mean, cheap things. I mean, it's wonderful. You get to go to the movie for less. I mean, you can't imagine, looking at those things. I mean, there are benefits to either age or disability or whatever, of going through that. But I think we need to talk through all of these things, with that IEP. And then work, steps to employment. We're doing the interest inventory, or are we just placing it? I see so many transitions, everybody's got the same jobs. Why? It's interesting, because our son, multiple disabilities, he grew up, I don't know what got him started, but he recycled before recycling was even kosher, of looking at that. I mean, we had to have baskets with the glass and the tan. I mean, clear back. That was clear back in the 70s, of looking at that. And he always wanted, so when he got to high school, it was interesting, because I didn't, again, still trying to make sure my kids did what I wanted them to do, because being, in the field, I always talk, my kids would never do the 5 Fs, because usually people with developmental disability or intellectual, either filth, flowers, food, fetching, and filth. And it's like they're either going to clean at a hotel, or they're going to be washing dishes, or they're going to be, I mean, we weren't very creative. So they weren't going to do that. Well, Chris was going to do filth because he wanted to work for the garbage company. You know, and they looked at us, and I thought, oh my God, first you're not doing what I asked. You know, but that's what he wanted. I mean, we started in. That was his dream goal. And everybody, and even me, oh my God, he's going to ride on the back of the garbage truck. Here's a kid. What if he falls off? Well, I mean, we had to get whole written permission from the school, because are we going to be held liable? Are you going to sue us? Or, you know, all of those things. Well, he did. And he knew the routes better than the guys. And I know that's where he learned to say F you as clear as a bell. You know, I'm looking at that because the guy's on the crew. I'm just telling. Well, it was interesting because he did fall off the truck. He did get run over. You know, broke his, I mean, it was interesting. You know, and no, we didn't sue them. And yes, we about lost him. But he was doing what he loved. He absolutely, but he knew after he wasn't going to do it again. So, you know, then we started person-centered planning again, you know, of what he's going to do. And then he literally went into, he just liked to carry stuff and do stuff. So he worked for a moving company. Literally, $18 an hour. Full benefits. You know, here's somebody that knew, I mean, because when they wanted Chris in an institution at K&I when he was born, because there wasn't even the law when he was born. You know, we said, no, that's not our thing. But it was interesting to see that he was making somebody that most people so low functioning, this isn't going to work. $18 an hour, full benefits, you know, of looking at it. And that's why we've got to think out of the box. You know, when I used to do transition, I'll never forget transition planning in Tennessee one year. I got called in. I was called in because something with busing, I can't remember, but we started then transition planning. And here was a girl that literally confined to a wheelchair, no language whatsoever. I mean, low functioning. And, you know, here, last year in school, I mean, there wasn't a lot of planning time. And then she had a friend that lived down the road. It was a little town outside of Nashville. And he was higher functioning. And, you know, I went to their homes. We sat most of the night, almost all night, planning, because we didn't have much time. And it was interesting because I wanted to know, what do you like? And we'll get to person-centered. What are your dreams? What are your fears? You know, what do you want to do when you get out? I mean, that's what person-centered planning is all about. You know, and it was interesting because I went to the one girl's room, and she had every plastic food. I thought I was in a store in her bedroom. I mean, it had everything. I mean, and her mom told me when we go to, she knows where everything is in Walmart. Okay. And then the young man, we got to talking, and they talked about him going on his gator. Well, I'd never heard of a gator. I thought, my God, they don't have alligators in Tennessee, do they? You know, no, it's a four-wheeler, but they call them gators. I'd never heard of that. I'd always heard four-wheelers or three-wheelers or whatever. But he could do it. So, you know, we literally planned, mapped, and we'll get to the person-centered planning. And we literally planned for them. What she did is we set up her own business. She had volunteers. She had a lot of friends, you know, of adults. And she would literally go, and we started a personal shopping business where she would personal shop for shut-ins, people that couldn't get out. I mean, she made $100 a week in tips. I mean, here was somebody that you thought couldn't do anything. The young man with his gator, because he lived right on the edge of town, and they planned ahead, because he had a house not very far down the road from the parents and whatever, because he was going to live on his own. But he started delivering for the flower shop on his gator, in town, all over town, on his gator, delivering. So when you tell me that an individual that's so low functioning can't do anything, I will tell you there's a way. If you sit down and truly plan, and you start early looking, there isn't one person that couldn't have a job. I don't care. We've made widgets. I never forget a man that had such behaviors. I mean, he would be headbanging. I mean, he'd put his head through the sheetrock in one area. And I mean, he was a shrink wrap. He'd do the thing. And I mean, never had an issue if he was busy. So don't tell me we can't find a position for and good paying positions. There was a girl with Down syndrome that was down in Franklin. She was so bright. I mean, she went through school. And it was so funny because she literally worked for a credit union. She knew numbers. I couldn't believe they hired her. So if people tell you, sons and daughters, you don't believe it because they can do anything. I'm just telling you. Now again, sometimes we have to sit there when we do person-centered planning and say, because I've had some, I want to be a doctor. Well, I can't even do that. But let's talk about what do you like, because they love being at the hospital. So let's talk about all other kinds of jobs at the hospital. What do you think we could find as a match or a fit, of looking at that? Because it's their dream, of making that a reality, and then play. Do they have friends? That was our biggest thing. I wanted a social life. And there, you'll see when we get to another slide, there's another thing called group action plan. Because we've done the circle of friends. Because circle of friends is where you literally you sit down as a team and you start looking, who's in this child's life? Is it only service providers? Is it only medical? Is it only family? We need to broaden. We need bigger circles. We need to get them more friends, of looking at that. And then we went through the person-centered planning in the past to get to the outcomes for both of our boys. And then at the end, it was funny because we moved to Kansas. We lived in Nebraska. Because Chris's dream was, when he saw his sister leave home and his brother, I mean, they were all close in age, I'm not living at home. Okay. So we literally went out and found a house. Then you had, what was the name of the company that you could buy? And then I'd gone around the country looking at, because families have gone together to buy homes, that maybe a couple people will live together, of doing that. And so Chris, literally, we bought a home. We found a lady that it was his best friend. She was older, but she lived with him. And they lived together for like 9 years, I think, of looking at that and going through. Whoops. And doing that. But it's just, again, that planning. And then GAP, group action planning, you're going to see that on one of the slides. I tried to give you every resource, the best in the country, the resources. GAP is called group action planning. And when we moved to Kansas, I'll never forget, Genevieve was like fit to be tied. Because here was our son with multiple disabilities. They lived in Nebraska. They didn't want to move. And being a state away, I thought she was going to have a coronary. Because Chris called every day, usually 3 times a day. Mama, Papa, because he didn't have language, of looking at that. But after a bit, you could work out. You knew what he wanted. But I thought Genevieve was going to kill me for moving, But eventually, about 6 months later, they moved down. And it was interesting because we lived then by the Turnbulls, who were big advocates, Rudd and Ann Turnbull, out of KU, when we learned the group action plan. And that's more like when he was an adult. Because then you have to, it's like Circle of Friends. But we sat down and find out, because he was new to the community. Because, and looking at that. And so what we did is we sat down, we had the Turnbulls over, we had people that we knew. Chris had met him before. And then again, it's almost like Circle of Friends. Where is he going to meet people and how is he going to socialize? So it was interesting. By the time we were done planning, Chris had a couple that he knew because he was working and for the moving company. And then he all of a sudden was asked to go into a fraternity. Because he was, 21 at that time? Just 21. And so he literally was in a fraternity. Escorted the house mother on Wednesday. Fraternity, again, that's where you got to cut the apron strings. The fraternity buds, I don't know what they did in Chicago one time. They had a retreat or whatever it's called, of looking at that. And I'll never forget, at one of the football games, even when he was in Nebraska with Mark, the one guy that became his best friend that we hired. All of a sudden, we were watching the Nebraska game, and Chris comes sliding across the field with his face as big as could be on the TV. Because on halftime, they were down to they were sliding. So it's like, oh my God. So it's just like your typical peers. You don't know. That 20 years later, they'll tell you how awful they were and what they did. Why should kids with disabilities be any different? You know, of looking at that as you go. Because they need to be with peers, you know, of going through that and looking at that. And then person-centered planning. What do we need to do? It needs to be done in somebody's house or someplace comfortable, not at school. If we're really looking, it's not a school thing, because we're looking at the totality. You know, we need to take it upon ourselves. It's not a school thing. Even though I'd invite people from school that know him or peers and teacher or whatever. They need to be a part of that because if they're in their life now, you know, of looking at that. Learn what person-centered planning encompasses, and then I've given you the definition. You know, a person-centered plan can help those involved with the focused person see the total person. And I'm talking totality. We need to talk everything. Not just work, not just living, but friends, community, you know, of looking at that. Because we don't, like I said, our biggest fear was if we died, I want them to have friends. Who else is? I mean, we had to plan who was even going to be our successors that would make sure that they would advocate for them if we passed away. You know, literally planning way somebody even younger. And we just didn't want just our kids to do that because, you know, brothers and sisters aren't the best sometimes. You know, they need to have outside sources in looking at that and going through it. The purpose, to look at the individual in a different way. Truly listening. Them, they are the focused person. Gaining control over their own life. Because we have a tendency, lots of individuals with this, they don't have control in their life. Everybody's controlling it. We really need to look at that. To increase opportunities for participation in the community, individual desires, interests, and dreams. And again, it's a team. I want their dreams turned into a reality. Now, we've all had dreams and we've had to change course. Don't get me wrong. We don't get whatever we want just automatically. It takes planning. It takes whatever. You know, where a person's home, when, any time in a person's life. I mean, that doesn't say you can't do one at home, even though you've got an IEP going, a circle of friends. I mean, look at all the different things. Are we getting to where we need to be? You know, really looking at that. And here are the tools. Circle of friends, maps. Maps is called making action plans. And then path, planning alternative tomorrows with hope. And then GAP, the group action planning. And then you're going to hear ELP, essential lifestyle planning. These are the big bugaboos in the whole thing. I mean, these are the ones you're going to hear about when you start going on the web, when you start researching. These are the key phrases that you're going to find. You know, they're all similar, but they've got little differences, you know, of looking at that. But these are the big ones. And then the tools, to be the biggest thing you should need to find a really good facilitator. Because if you don't, we're not going to be focused on that person. We kind of get in our own little comfort zone. And they need to have a background in conflict and negotiation. I think all people need to have that skill, you know, of looking at that. Flip charts, markers. I would have food and snacks, just like here. You know, make sure someone keeps notes. And not so much, I just want them to kind of an outline. They don't keep, because when you do person-centered planning, you've got that chart paper. And you're going to be graphing up. And it can be very colorful. It doesn't even have to be words of what you're going to do. Because I'm going to get, there's a couple places. And then, everyone invited believes in the process. Don't bring in a naysayer. Because you don't have time to just have a lot of conflict. We're here to talk about, we're going to plan for their life. If theirs, do you really believe that they have control?